some of the you first messaged me mentioning some Dirty Pretty Things story where they ended up playing in your halls of residence.
Yeah, yeah. So I went to uni in Cork, which is right beside Ireland or Waterford. It's in Ireland. Um, so I went to uni in Cork in 2005, and obviously the Libertines had imploded. Pete was going through a serious kind of phase, um, but also a really remarkably creative phase. I think that first Baby Shambles album is just so good. And I know you've had Pat Walden on, and his guitar playing is as good as anything that was made during that time. Um, but yeah, that's tangential. Yeah, got into uni, and then I had access to the internet. I was I definitely had access to more music, and I had constant access to .org. So Dirty Pretty Things announced that they had formed, that they were going to release an album. Um, and I think their first show was at the NME Awards in February 2006. Like that was their big unveiling. And it was quite a thing, I think, to see what Carl would do next. Because like Pete had put stuff out there under Baby Shambles. I think Kilimanjaro had been out already. Um, but no one knew what Carl was going to do next. Um, and then, if not the following night, but maybe a night later, they kicked off their kind of UK tour of smaller UK and Ireland tour of smaller venues, and for some reason decided to start that tour in Cork in a venue called Cypress Avenue. Um, and we kind of found this out maybe 4 weeks beforehand. Um, so all of a sudden, there were kids on that forum saying, "I'm coming from Germany, I'm coming from the UK, I'm coming from France, I'm coming from Belfast, I'm coming from Dublin." Which even Belfast is, probably Belfast Cork would be the equivalent of Manchester to London, maybe. Um, and given all these kids were kind of 16, 17, some 18, it's quite a quite a way. And the ones that came from France and Germany were just turned 18. Everyone was so young, and we just had this real kind of idealism. And I lived in it. It wasn't like Irish student accommodation is slightly different. It's not quite halls, but they're still pretty well, at the time they were pretty shoddy flats, basically, that had too many people in them. But I decided everyone could stay in mine, even though it wasn't very big. And then this whole kind of talk began happening about like, what if we got Carl back to kind of play a few songs after? And like now I'm a bit older, I'm like, God, he must have been going through a really hard time, and he had all these kids looking up in his face, going, "Come entertain us." Um, but yeah, all those people started arriving at my flat. It was a Friday night. They started arriving pretty early on the Friday. And we'd introduce ourselves by our usernames, our handles.
Right.
you know. So
What was yours?
I had two. I had a Stoned Alfie, which was my general kind of online name until I lost that somehow, and I had set up a new one, and I set up one called Unfilo Titled, uh, which is embarrassing
I quite like that.
now. Yeah, but all these kids started showing up. We spent a day kind of drinking in the flat, playing songs, talking about how much we love this band. Um, Thankfully, I think all but one of my flatmates had gone home for the weekend, but I didn't know that one of them had remained. He just didn't like me very much. So he was in his room completely unbeknownst to me. Um, yeah, and we started talking more about like, why let's write down on this piece of paper where the address is, where the party's at, and anyone we meet, we're gonna tell him, give this to Carl. I'm sure Gary will come out and talk to us afterwards. Give it to him, give it to Anthony, give it to whoever's there. And we just had like hundreds of torn up pieces of paper with my address on them, and phone numbers, and my mobile number. Um, and yeah, we got there. We had this big day, and we were really hamming it up. We were drinking Buckfast and gin and teacups and all those kind of. In one way, like I don't cringe about it anymore. I'm like this. It's quite cute. It's like we were really really invested in this thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And like honestly invested in it. Um, and yeah, we went to uh, Cypress Avenue, and there was a bit of a crisis because the bouncers decided that me and my friend Patrick had had too much to drink, and they weren't going to let us in. Uh, and then one of them said, "Why don't you go in and have a glass of lemonade?" So we went to the main bar, had a glass of lemonade, came back, chewed some chewing gum. They let us in, and the gig was
What? So you had to do that and then go back to them?
it's just this little dance. Yeah,
Right,
yeah. So
right.
so the Cypress Avenue is above a pub called the Old Oak, but they're owned by the same people. So it was kind of like go in there, don't cause trouble for an hour, and then we'll let you in.
Right, right.
And that was fine. And we got in, and I think it's funny how like so much of this kind of comes full circle. But there was a band supporting them called Mainline, who I think three of the members of that band formed another group 5 years down the road who I ended up touring with. So it's all these things kind of intersect. Um, but yeah, Mainline were on. We probably didn't pay much attention to them because when you're that young, all you want to see is the main band. And Dirty Pretty Things came on. And I remember the stage was so packed. The band has to walk. The dressing rooms aren't behind the stage. They're out by the bar area, which it kind of faces the back of the crowd. And like I think it took about 15 minutes for the band to get through to the stage. And it's probably only about 200, 250 capacity venue. I think I have a feeling that Carl may have just jumped on people, as in like crowd surfed to the front, and it was all very kind of rock and roll. And then they started with Bang Bang You're Dead, which was the only song anyone knew. And it was great. It was so good. Anthony Rismando pulled out that trumpet and did his thing. And it was just like, I mean, I didn't love their output after that album, and I haven't gone back to that album in a long time. But that song and a couple of other sounds in that album are really really strong. Um, and yeah, it was wild. It was such a great gig. But gig came and went, and predictably, we all hung out to see if the band would come out, and they did. And the pieces of paper were flying everywhere. It's like they were just littered across the floor with my name, number, and address. And I think Anthony was the first one who said he'd go. Dids didn't have an interest. I'm not sure Dids even hung out uh, afterwards. And then a kind of through different people, they were like, "Yeah, Carl's going to come back. Carl's going to come back." And I was like, I mean, for me at that time, it was like Keith Richards saying he's going to come to my house.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you know what I mean? I'm just
Yeah, I
like,
do know
oh
what you mean. Yeah,
I
definitely.
know. And I mean, this like off up the bracket, my favorite song may be "Death on the Stairs," and I'm like, this guy wrote "Death on the Stairs." You know, it's just, um. So yeah, we all rushed back. We were running in between cars, getting taxis, getting buses, whatever. And we got there, and there were definitely too many people in the flat. There was probably about 30 people in the flat before Carl showed up, and someone screamed because I saw him, Anthony, and then the two guys that Alan McGee hired to or no, one of the two guys that Alan McGee hired to separate him and Pete. That I think Pete used to call him the twins.
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, one of them guys, and he's a big lad. Saw them just kind of walking into these, very obviously kind of college campus accommodation or uni campus accommodation. And people were like, "Oh, he's here, he's fucking here." So I had to kind of go down and welcome him like he was like a president stepping off a jet or something like that. And he was kind of saying, "Oh, is this your halls?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And yeah, he came in. Um, we everyone was very excited. the twin number one, maybe, I don't know which one he was, but he was pretty hungry and looking for, a chicken shop or whatever, and like, there was no takeaway to be had, so I was just like making him toast and tea like, because I was like, I need this guy to last because if he
Yeah,
goes,
yeah.
everyone goes. So he kind of sat at the back, and you can see him on YouTube on some of those videos. He's just there, kind of going, "Oh, what am I doing?" And I won't blame him. Um, yeah, and yeah, uh, Carl and Anthony proceeded quite generously to just entertain this room of teenagers for the next maybe 2 hours, and just like there was this cursory, like, oh yeah, let's put on some music. I remember I put on a Small Faces record, and that lasted maybe, I don't know, 2 songs before, someone, I don't know if Anthony or Carl picked up a guitar, and then it was just call out a song and we'll play it, and it was so brilliant. It was so um it was very generous. It's maybe it was a thing that kind of um it's one of those things. The things that make it great are the things that kind of can be your undoing as well. And maybe that's the thing with the Libertines. They were just too generous in that sense. Um, so like the first side of the tour, going back and singing to 30 fans in college halls and not leaving till 5 a.m. It's it's just not it's not what bands would do now. You know what I mean? They'd probably go to their mate's house and play some songs or something, but they wouldn't go to a complete stranger's house, I don't think. Maybe they would.
Yeah.
I don't know. Um, but yeah, they pretty much gave us this because the album wasn't out yet, so they gave us this kind of, you know, um, listening session for the album. They played. I remember they did a really really good acoustic version of that, was all acoustic, of Bloodthirsty Bastards, and it was really really powerful and kind of obviously resonated with the narrative of what was going on around the Libertines at the time. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it was pretty special, and it became this thing. I think they left at like, oh yeah, at one point, Carl came in and was like, "Oh, there's no toilet paper in your drinks." I was like, "Oh, sorry, mate." Anyway, I thought that was the end of it, and the following day, the warden showed up, but I was gone from the flat. I don't know, I was gone to the shops or something, and that flatmate who had hidden out in his room all night uh kind of greeted me when I came back and was like, the warden has been up. I was like, I didn't fucking know you were here. You telling me you stayed in your flat all night long when this is happening outside? How the fuck did you do that? And he was like, loads of toilet roll has been thrown out the window.
Right.
I've had to go down and clean it up, otherwise we'd be evicted. And I was like, whatever. I was like, we had the greatest night of rock and roll, and you stayed in your bedroom. um, yeah. So, and then it became this thing on campus where, like, up to that point, I was definitely the kind of Pete Doherty reject looking guy walking around campus with my trilby and Breton stripes, and I still wear Breton stripes unapologetically, and you know, skinny jeans that were probably women's jeans, and just clothes that weren't yet popular. Um, and could get you, that was the other thing. At that point, your skinny jeans could get you in a lot of bother, and they did get me in a lot of bother. Um, but it became this thing that, like, that guy that walks around in Trilby thinks he's Pete Doherty. Carl Barat went back to his flat last night, so it became this. You'd be in like the college bar, and they were like, "Are you the guy? Are you the guy?" So I got to write that. I got to write that for a few weeks, and kind of at different parties tell that story. And yeah, it was just really special. It was really really special, and like, I don't know how many times. I would imagine Carl's done that quite a few times. Um, but there was something really pure about the group of people that were in the flat. These were people who were so dedicated to the group that they travelled from outside Ireland to see the first gig from a band from which they had only heard one song. Um, you know, rather than maybe what people who came to the Libertines a little bit later will become like these us as kids were living this, you know, mythology and I won't say lifestyle, but we, you know, it became something else quite rapidly. Um, but I think for that kind of time, maybe, you know, I'm sure in the early days of 2000 or whatever, that's kind of stuff. But for those kind of 6 years, it seemed there was a purity to it that kind of went out the window a little bit later on. You know,
Mm.
people like the people in that flat believed in the power of poetry. They believed in the power of words. They believed in kind of rock and roll as a redemptive force. They believed in literature, film, art, and we talked about that. You know, we did like we talked about our favorite films, old films. We talked about our favorite books, new and old books. Um, and I think that that's been lost to some degree now in the great kind of Libertines history. You know.
Mm. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. Um, yeah, I was just watching that video just then. Look cool.
Yeah,
The
it was really really great.
Castle White session.
The Castle White session. Yeah, yeah. It was a girl from Germany, I think, uploaded that. I can't remember her name. She was very very nice though.
Okay. Yes, I'll include that in the
Yeah.
description.